The morning sun of Kepler Station cast long shadows through the crystal windows of the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology. Students from dozens of worlds hurried through the corridors, their various forms creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and whispered conversations in 100 different languages. The smell of ozone and recycled air mixed with the faint scent of alien flora from the botanical gardens. Alex walked quietly among them, his simple human form drawing little attention. He carried his datapad close to his chest and kept his eyes down, just another exchange student trying to blend in. His brown hair was kept short and neat, his clothes practical and unremarkable. Nothing about him suggested he was anything other than a curious young scholar from a peaceful world. The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as students took their seats. Alex chose a spot near the back, away from the main clusters of chattering aliens. He pulled out his stylus and prepared to take notes, the same routine he had followed for months. Professor Thamel entered the room with the confident stride of someone who had spent decades studying the most dangerous creatures in known space. His crystalline skin caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. His 4 eyes moved independently, scanning the room to ensure all students were present. The Kethran stood nearly 8 feet tall, his thin frame deceptively fragile-looking despite his species' reputation for incredible mental endurance. "Good morning, class," Timmel said, his voice carrying easily through the acoustically perfect chamber. "Today we begin our most important module, the study of apex predators from classified deathworlds." A ripple of excitement and fear moved through the students. Rip, the insectoid Vorthak in the front row, rubbed his razor-sharp mandibles together nervously. His black exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, and his compound eyes reflected dozens of tiny images of the professor. "Professor," Rip clicked in his mechanical voice, "are we certain the safety protocols are adequate for this subject matter?" Thamel's 4 eyes focused on the nervous student. "We will be studying recordings and preserved specimens only, Rip. The actual creatures remain safely contained on their respective worlds, far from civilized space." Nala raised one of her graceful arms, her aquatic form shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated curiosity mixed with anxiety. The Myron's gills fluttered as she spoke. "How do we define a death world, Professor? Surely the classification system varies between species." "An excellent question," Thamel replied, moving to activate the holographic display system. "A death world is classified as any planet where the environmental conditions and native life forms pose an immediate and ongoing threat to standard galactic life. These worlds feature extreme gravity, hostile atmosphere, deadly weather patterns, and most importantly, predatory species that have evolved beyond normal parameters." The lights dimmed, and the first hologram materialized in the center of the room. It showed a massive creature with too many teeth and eyes that seemed to track the movements of the watching students. Several aliens gasped and moved back in their seats. "This is an umbral from Darkness 7, Thymel explained calmly. "It hunts using sound waves that can shatter bone from 3 kilometers away. Notice the redundant sensory organs and the reinforced skeletal structure. This creature represents evolution pushed to its absolute limits by environmental pressure." Alex leaned forward slightly, studying the creature with what appeared to be academic interest. He made careful notes about the umbral's hunting patterns and physical adaptations. His expression remained neutral, though something that might have been recognition flickered briefly in his eyes. The next hologram showed a pack of Volf-like creatures with metallic fur and claws that could cut through starship hull plating. "The razorclaw swarms of Pharaoh's Prime," Thimel continued. "They hunt in groups of up to 50 individuals and have been known to bring down prey 100 times their individual size through coordinated attacks." Poor, the massive granite student, whose rock-like body took up 2 regular seats, rumbled his concern. "Professor, how does any ecosystem support predators of this magnitude? The energy requirements alone should be impossible." "That is precisely what makes death worlds so fascinating and terrifying," Thimel replied. "These environments operate outside our understanding of normal biological limitations. The predators we will study today represent the pinnacle of survival adaptation. They possess healing rates that defy medical science, pain tolerance that borders on the supernatural, and hunting instincts honed by millions of years of evolutionary arms races. Alex's stylus paused for just a moment over his datapad before resuming its steady movement. He glanced around the room, noting how his classmates leaned away from the holograms, their various species fear responses triggered by the images of ultimate predators. "Can you imagine," Thimel continued, "what it would be like to evolve alongside such creatures? To survive on worlds where every day requires constant vigilance, where weakness means death, where only the most adaptable and resilient individuals live long enough to reproduce?" The professor switched to a new hologram showing a creature that resembled a massive bear crossed with a tank. Its hide was scarred by countless battles, and its eyes held an intelligence that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. "The armored stalkers of Titan's Edge," Themel announced. "These creatures can survive direct hits from plasma weapons and have been observed using tools and primitive tactics in their hunts. They represent what happens when raw survival instinct is combined with developing intelligence." Nala's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly, indicating extreme distress. "Professor, surely no sapient species could evolve on worlds with creatures like these. The pressures would be too extreme." Thamel's 4 eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. "That is what makes our next subject so fascinating. There are rumors, unconfirmed reports from the Outer Rim, of worlds where sapient species did indeed evolve alongside such predators. Imagine, if you will, what kind of beings would emerge from such an environment." Alex's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his stylus. He continued taking notes, but his breathing had become slightly more controlled, more deliberate. "These theoretical sapient Deathworld species would possess abilities that we can barely comprehend," Thimel continued. "Enhanced reflexes incredible. Endurance, the ability to function under extreme stress. And most disturbing of all, they would consider such conditions normal. They would be beings for whom our greatest nightmares would be nothing more than everyday challenges." The professor paused, letting the implications sink in. "Fortunately for the stability of galactic civilization, such species remain theoretical. The Galactic Council maintains strict quarantine protocols around suspected death worlds, ensuring that if such beings exist, they remain safely isolated from the broader community." Rip's mandibles clicked nervously. What would happen if such beings ever made contact with galactic civilization? Thermal's expression became serious. The potential for disruption would be enormous. Beings adapted to Deathworld conditions would possess capabilities that could destabilize our carefully maintained peace. They would be, in essence, living weapons shaped by evolution itself. Alex closed his datapad quietly and gathered his materials as the class period drew to a close. Around him, his classmates continued to discuss the terrifying creatures they had studied, their voices filled with morbid fascination and relief that such monsters remained safely distant. As the students filed out of the lecture hall, none of them noticed the small smile that crossed Alex's face, or the way his movements seemed just a little too fluid, a little too controlled for someone from a peaceful world. He walked among them like a wolf among sheep, hidden not by deception but by their own inability to recognize what they were looking at. The first lesson in Deathworld monsters was complete, and the greatest predator in the room had learned something valuable about how the galaxy viewed his kind. The transport shuttle hummed quietly as it carried the xenobiology students across the sprawling cityscape of Kepler Station toward the Galactic Museum of Natural History. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Alex could see the massive structure growing larger as they approached. The museum's biomimetic architecture resembled a giant shell, its curved walls shifting color in response to the changing light of the station's artificial sun. Professor Thymel stood at the front of the shuttle, his crystalline skin reflecting the soft interior lighting as he addressed the group. "Today we will witness preserved specimens and habitat recreations of the most dangerous predators known to galactic science. The museum's Deathworld exhibit requires special clearance and safety protocols. You must remain with the group at all times." Alex sat near a window, watching the city pass below while listening to his classmates chatter nervously about the upcoming experience. Rip had spent the entire morning researching emergency procedures, his mandibles clicking anxiously as he reviewed evacuation routes. Nala's bioluminescent patches had been flickering in nervous patterns since breakfast, and even Tor seemed unusually quiet, his rocky exterior somehow managing to convey unease. "Alex," Nala called softly from across the aisle, "you seem remarkably calm about visiting displays of the galaxy's most terrifying creatures. Are you not concerned?" Alex turned from the window and offered a reassuring smile. "I find predator behavior fascinating from a scientific perspective. Understanding how these creatures evolved and adapted can teach us a lot about survival and resilience." Rip's compound eyes focused on Alex. "But surely the thought of being in proximity to such dangerous specimens, even preserved ones, must trigger some survival response. My people's evolutionary memory makes it difficult for me to even look at the recorded images without experiencing fight-or-flight reactions. Perhaps my species just has a higher tolerance for studying dangerous subjects," Alex replied calmly. "Different evolutionary backgrounds lead to different comfort levels with various stimuli." The shuttle docked at the museum's private landing platform, reserved for educational groups visiting restricted exhibits. Security personnel in environmental suits guided the students through multiple scanning procedures and safety briefings. Each student was fitted with a personal emergency beacon and a lightweight, environmental suit designed to protect them from potential hazardous exposures. Professor Thimo led them through corridors, lined with warnings in dozens of galactic languages. The walls displayed scrolling text about Deathworld classifications, safety protocols, and emergency procedures. Alex noted that his classmates moved closer together as they walked, their various species herding instincts activated by the increasingly ominous atmosphere. The first section of the exhibit featured holographic recreations of Deathworld environments. Students stood on reinforced observation platforms while around them swirled simulations of toxic storms, crushing gravity fields and landscapes that seemed designed to kill anything foolish enough to exist there. "This represents the atmospheric conditions of Hellscape Prime," Thimal explained as acid rain simulation pelted the protective barriers around them. "The air itself is corrosive enough to dissolve most known materials within minutes. Yet this world supports a thriving ecosystem of predators specifically adapted to these conditions." Tor's massive form shuddered as he watched the simulation. How does evolution even begin in such an environment? The margin for error would be essentially non-existent. "That is precisely what makes Deathworld evolution so remarkable," Thimo replied. "Only the most perfectly adapted organisms survive each generation, leading to creatures of incredible efficiency and lethality." They moved deeper into the exhibit, passing displays of preserved specimens in stasis fields. Alex found himself studying the creatures with an intensity that differed from his classmates' horrified fascination. Where they saw monsters, he saw successful evolutionary adaptations. The redundant organ systems, the reinforced skeletal structures, the efficient muscle configurations, everything made perfect sense when viewed as responses to environmental pressure. "Professor," Nala asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "are there any known cases of sapient species surviving on Deathworlds?" Thimel's 4 eyes gleamed as he led them to the exhibit's centerpiece. "That brings us to our most significant display." They entered a vast chamber dominated by a detailed recreation of an alien landscape. Rolling hills covered in strange vegetation stretched toward distant mountains. The gravity felt noticeably heavier than the station's standard, causing several students to move more carefully. The air smelled of rich earth and growing things, but underneath lay the scent of something wild and untamed. "Welcome to the Terra exhibit," Thamal announced. "Classification, Class 12 Deathworld, quarantined." Alex's steps slowed slightly as he took in the familiar sights of an Earth-like environment. His classmates marveled at the alien landscape, but to him it looked like home. The grass beneath their feet, the shape of the leaves on the trees, even the way the light filtered through the artificial atmosphere, everything triggered memories of a blue world, orbiting a yellow star, display cases around the perimeter of the habitat contained preserved specimens of Earth's predators. Alex watched his classmates react with terror to creatures he had grown up knowing as simply part of nature. A great white shark hung in a stasis field, its massive jaws frozen open to display rows of serrated teeth. Rip actually backed away from the display, his exoskeleton rattling. This apex aquatic predator, Thimol explained, demonstrates the incredible efficiency of Deathworld evolution. Its sensory capabilities allow it to detect the electrical fields generated by living creatures from vast distances. Its bite force exceeds anything we have measured in galactic fauna. They moved to the next display, where a grizzly bear stood rearing on its hind legs. Nala's bioluminescent patches flickered rapidly as she stared at the massive creature. "How large do these predators grow?" she asked. "This specimen represents an average adult," Thamel replied. "They possess strength sufficient to overturn vehicles and claws that can shred reinforced materials. But perhaps most disturbing is their intelligence. These creatures demonstrate problem-solving abilities and tool use that borders on sapience." Alex felt a strange mix of pride and sadness as he watched his classmates react to the animals he had always considered beautiful and majestic. The bear in the display case could have been one he had observed during camping trips with his family. The shark might have been swimming in waters where he had learned to surf as a child. "But the most remarkable discovery on this Deathworld," Thimol continued, leading them toward the central display, was evidence of a sapient species that not only survived but thrived in this hostile environment. The centerpiece of the Terra exhibit was a detailed diorama showing early humans around a campfire. The figures were anatomically accurate, showing humans as they existed thousands of years ago. They carried primitive weapons and wore simple clothing, but their eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. "They called themselves humans," Thimol explained. "Archaeological evidence suggests they evolved alongside the apex predators we have already observed. Rather than developing specialized adaptations like enhanced armor or natural weapons, they survived through intelligence, tool use, and perhaps most remarkably, an almost supernatural ability to endure punishment and continue functioning." Alex stood before the display, looking at figures that resembled his own ancestors. The primitive humans in the diorama held spears and worked together around their fire, just as his species had done for millennia. But to his classmates they looked like aliens from a nightmare world. How did they manage to achieve dominance over such powerful predators? Tor asked, his rocky voice filled with disbelief. "Persistence hunting," Thimol replied. "They would pursue prey for days or even weeks, never giving up, never stopping. Their endurance was legendary. They could outlast creatures many times their size and strength simply through sheer determination and refusal to surrender." Rip's mandibles clicked nervously. "That sounds less like intelligence and more like obsessive predatory behavior." "The distinction becomes blurred when examining Deathworld species," Thimol admitted. "These humans demonstrated incredible problem-solving abilities, complex social structures, and advanced tool creation. But their approach to survival was fundamentally different from any other known sapient species. They were, in essence, pursuit predators who had developed intelligence." Alex forced himself to maintain his neutral expression as he listened to his species being described as if they were extinct monsters. The humans in the display were labeled with scientific notation and behavioral analysis that reduced them to specimens rather than people. "Fortunately," Thamel continued, "this species appears to have remained confined to their Deathworld. The Galactic Council implemented strict quarantine protocols around Terra shortly after its discovery. If beings with such survival instincts ever reach galactic civilization, the disruption could be catastrophic." Nala moved closer to the human display, her bioluminescent patterns showing intense curiosity mixed with fear. "Professor, what happened to them? Did they destroy themselves? Did their environment finally overcome them?" Thamol's 4 eyes studied the diorama thoughtfully. Unknown, long-range scans suggest the planet still supports life, but the quarantine prevents detailed study. For the safety of galactic civilization, some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. As the group prepared to move to the next section of the exhibit, Alex lingered for a moment before the human display. His reflection in the protective barrier overlapped with the primitive figures behind the transparent material, creating a strange double image that none of his classmates noticed. "Alex," Rip called, "are you coming?" Professor Thimmel is beginning the section on psychological adaptation to extreme environments. Alex turned away from the display of his own species and rejoined the group. As they walked deeper into the exhibit, he listened to his classmates discuss the terrifying humans of Terra with a mixture of fascination and relief that such dangerous beings remained safely isolated from the civilized galaxy. None of them noticed that the quiet exchange student walking among them moved with the same fluid grace as the persistence hunters in the display case, or that his eyes held the same intelligent determination that had allowed his species to become the apex predators of a Deathworld. The preparation chamber buzzed with nervous energy as students checked their survival equipment for the third time in 10 minutes. Professor Thimmel stood at the front of the room, his crystalline form reflecting the harsh, artificial lighting as he reviewed the final safety protocols for their practical examination. "This survival exercise will test your ability to apply theoretical knowledge in a controlled but challenging environment," Thimmel announced. "You will spend 48 hours in Habitat 7, which simulates mild Deathworld conditions. The gravity has been increased to 1.2 standard. Temperature will fluctuate between uncomfortable but survivable ranges, and the ecosystem includes several non-lethal but startling native species." Rip's mandibles clicked frantically as he struggled to adjust his equipment harness. "Professor, when you say non-lethal, exactly how non-lethal do you mean?" "My species has very specific tolerances for stress responses. The creatures in the habitat are programmed to avoid actual contact with students," Thimmel replied patiently. "They will create realistic predator scenarios without causing physical harm. Think of them as very sophisticated training tools designed to trigger your natural survival responses." Nala raised her graceful arm, her bioluminescent patches flickering with anxiety. "Will the environmental suits protect us from the enhanced gravity and atmospheric conditions?" "You will wear minimal protection only," Thimmel explained. "Basic temperature regulation and emergency beacons. The purpose of this exercise is to experience how mild Deathworld conditions affect your decision-making and survival instincts. Full environmental protection would defeat the educational objective." Alex quietly checked his gear, noting that the survival kit contained basic tools that seemed almost primitive compared to what he was accustomed to working with. A simple fire starter, basic first aid supplies, emergency rations, and a lightweight shelter. He had spent weekends in Earth's wilderness with less equipment and considered it. Recreational camping, Tor's massive rocky form shifted nervously. "Professor, my species evolved in low-gravity environments. Will the increased gravitational field pose a significant risk to my structural integrity?" "All environmental factors remain within survivable parameters for your respective species," Thimmel assured him. "However, you will find the conditions challenging. That is the point of the exercise." The airlock leading to Habitat 7 cycled, open with a soft hiss. Beyond lay a landscape that looked remarkably similar to the Terra exhibit they had visited the previous week. Rolling hills covered with Earth-like vegetation stretched toward a simulated horizon. The air carried the sense of growing things and rich soil, but also something wilder and more primal. Alex stepped through the airlock and immediately felt the increased gravity settle over him like a familiar embrace. To him, it felt almost exactly like home. His classmates, however, struggled with the transition. Rip's exoskeleton made creaking sounds as it adjusted to the additional stress. Nala moved more slowly, her aquatic form working harder to maintain balance. Tor's usual confident stride became careful and measured. "Remember," Thimmel's voice crackled through their communication devices, "you have emergency beacons if the situation becomes truly dangerous." However, using them will result in failure of the exercise. Work together, apply what you have learned, and survive until extraction in 48 hours. The communication link closed, leaving the students alone in the simulated Deathworld environment. Alex looked around, automatically cataloging resources and potential shelter sites. His movements were efficient and purposeful, guided by instincts his classmates did not possess. "We should establish a base camp before nightfall," Rip suggested, his voice strained by the effort of moving under increased gravity. "Somewhere defensible with access to water." "Agreed," Nala said, her gills working harder in the thicker atmosphere. "But we need to survey the area first. We do not know what kinds of predator scenarios the habitat might present." Alex pointed toward a cluster of trees near a small stream. "That location offers shelter from weather, fresh water, and good sight lines for monitoring approaches. The trees will provide materials for fire and basic tools." Tor looked in the direction Alex indicated. "How can you be certain the water source is safe?" "Deathworld environments often feature contaminated or dangerous water supplies." "The scent is clean, and I can see the bottom of the stream from here," Alex replied. "Also, there are signs of small herbivorous animals using it as a water source. If it were contaminated, we would see evidence in the local ecosystem." His classmates stared at him with surprise. Rip's compound eyes focused on Alex with new attention. "How did you observe all of that so quickly?" "I've been looking at the same area and noticed none of those details." Alex realized he had revealed more capability than intended. "My homeworld has similar ecosystems. I suppose I have some natural familiarity with this type of environment." They moved toward the location Alex had identified, but the increased gravity quickly began taking its toll on his alien classmates. Rip's exoskeleton creaked ominously with each step. Nala's breathing became labored as her respiratory system worked to extract oxygen from the denser atmosphere. Even Tor, despite his species' reputation for durability, moved with visible effort. Alex found himself unconsciously adjusting his pace to match theirs, having to remind himself to appear more affected by the conditions than he actually was. The gravity felt completely normal to him, and the atmosphere was almost identical to what he had breathed for the first 18 years of his life when they reached the stream. Alex knelt and cupped water in his hands, testing it carefully before drinking. "It is clean," he confirmed. "We can use this as our primary water source." "How can you be certain?" Nala asked. "Should we not use the purification tablets from our survival kits?" "Save those for emergency situations," Alex replied. "Fresh running water with this clarity and mineral content is safe for consumption. The purification tablets have limited quantities." While his classmates struggled to adapt to the environmental conditions, Alex began constructing shelter with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. He selected appropriate materials, created basic tools from available resources, and established a fire pit with practiced ease. Rip watched in amazement as Alex wove branches into a weatherproof shelter framework. "Where did you learn these construction techniques?" "This level of skill suggests extensive wilderness survival training." "The basic education on my homeworld included practical survival skills," Alex replied truthfully. "Most children learn these techniques as part of standard curriculum." As the artificial sun began to set, the habitat's nocturnal phase activated. Strange sounds echoed through the darkening landscape, howls, rustling movements, and the occasional snap of breaking vegetation. The alien students instinctively moved closer together, their evolutionary fear responses triggered by sounds that suggested large predators moving in the darkness. Alex volunteered for the first watch while his classmates attempted to rest. As night deepened, the sounds grew louder and more frequent. Glowing eyes appeared at the edge of their firelight before disappearing again. The simulation creatures were designed to create realistic predator encounters without actual danger, but to beings from peaceful worlds, the experience was genuinely terrifying. Nala's bioluminescent patches flickered constantly as she tried to sleep, her natural defense. Mechanisms activated by stress. Rip's exoskeleton rattled softly each time a howl echoed through the habitat. Tor, despite his rocky durability, positioned himself with his back against a tree and his eyes constantly scanning the darkness. Alex sat calmly by the fire, occasionally adding fuel to maintain the flames. When movement in the bush suggested something large approaching their camp, he simply stood and walked to the edge of the light. A creature resembling a massive Volf emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with predatory intelligence. The simulation beast and Alex regarded each other across the space of a few meters. The creature's programming told it to create a threatening scenario without actual contact, but something in Alex's posture and direct eye contact triggered different responses. The Volf-like creature paused, tilted its head slightly, and then melted back into the darkness without advancing further. "What just happened?" Rip whispered from behind Alex. "How did you make it retreat without any aggressive action?" Alex returned to the fire and sat down calmly. Predators typically avoid confrontation unless they are certain of victory. Confident behavior can discourage attacks even from dangerous creatures. "But you showed no fear at all," Nala observed her bioluminescent patterns reflecting confusion. "My species' fear responses would have been completely overwhelming in that situation. How did you maintain such composure?" "Different species have different responses to stress," Alex replied. "Perhaps my people simply have higher thresholds for fear activation." Throughout the night, more creatures approached their camp. Each time, Alex handled the encounter with calm efficiency. He never showed aggression toward the simulation beasts, but his presence seemed to discourage them from pressing their programmed scenarios. His classmates watched in growing amazement as their quiet human friend demonstrated survival capabilities that seemed impossible for someone from a peaceful world. When morning came, Alex had maintained their fire, kept watch through the entire night, and successfully prevented any predator encounters from escalating. His alien classmates woke to find him preparing a simple breakfast from their rations, showing no signs of fatigue despite his sleepless night. "Alex," Tor rumbled, "your performance last night was extraordinary. Are you certain your homeworld is classified as peaceful? Your survival instincts seem far more developed than those of someone from a standard galactic civilization." Alex looked up from the fire where he was heating water for their morning meal. For a moment, his carefully maintained facade slipped, and something wild and ancient flickered in his eyes. Then the moment passed, and he was once again the quiet exchange student they thought they knew. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "some worlds produce people who are simply better adapted to challenging situations." The second morning in the habitat dawned with an ominous red tint to the artificial sky. Alex noticed the color change immediately and felt his muscles tense with anticipation. The habitat's environmental systems were showing signs of stress, subtle fluctuations in temperature and atmospheric pressure that his enhanced senses could detect but his alien classmates had not yet noticed. Rip emerged from the shelter, his exoskeleton already showing hairline cracks from the prolonged exposure to increased gravity. "Something feels different this morning," he clicked nervously. "The air pressure seems unstable. The artificial weather system may be cycling to a more challenging phase," Nala suggested, though her bioluminescent patches flickered with uncertainty. "Perhaps this is part of the intended test scenario." Alex said nothing, but his instincts were screaming warnings. The environmental fluctuations felt random rather than programmed, suggesting actual system failures rather than planned challenges. He began mentally cataloging escape routes and defensive positions while maintaining his outward appearance of calm concern. Tor's massive form shifted uneasily as another gravity fluctuation made the ground seem to ripple beneath their feet. "This does not feel like a controlled test environment anymore. Should we consider activating our emergency beacons?" Professor Thymel said using the beacons would result in automatic failure, Rip reminded them. "Perhaps we should wait and see if conditions stabilize." A sharp crack echoed through the habitat as one of the environmental control towers, visible in the distance, sparked and went dark. The artificial sky flickered, and for a moment the gravity increased to nearly twice standard before returning to its previous level. Alex watched his classmates struggle to remain standing during the fluctuation while he barely had to adjust his balance. That was definitely not planned, Nala said, her voice tight with worry. Something is malfunctioning in the habitat's control systems. Before anyone could respond, a new sound joined the ambient noise of the simulated ecosystem. It was a deep, mechanical roar that spoke of systems engaging that were never meant to be activated during student exercises. Alex recognized it immediately as the sound of emergency protocols initiating, the kind that released the habitat's most dangerous training scenarios. "Everyone stay close together," Alex said, his voice carrying a note of command that had not been there before. Something is very wrong here. The first creature to emerge from the newly activated scenarios was nothing like the mild predator simulations they had encountered the previous night. It was a perfect recreation of an earth grizzly bear standing 9 feet tall on its hind legs and moving with the fluid grace of a true apex predator. But unlike the previous night's cautious Wolf simulation, this bear showed no hesitation or programmed restraint. The massive creature charged directly toward their camp with the speed and determination of something truly hunting prey. Rip's mandibles snapped in terror as his damaged exoskeleton prevented him from moving quickly enough to escape. The bear's claws, each as long as a combat knife, reached for the paralyzed insectoid student. Alex moved without conscious thought, placing himself between the bear and Rip in a single fluid motion. What happened next defied everything his classmates thought they knew about physics, biology, and the capabilities of peaceful species. Alex did not retreat or seek shelter. Instead, he stepped forward to meet the charging bear, his movements shifting from the careful restraint he had maintained for months to something primal and efficient. His hands found a fallen branch, and in one smooth motion he converted it into a spear with a sharpened point created by scraping it against a rock. The bear's claws swept toward Alex's head, but he was no longer where the strike was aimed. He had dropped beneath the attack and driven his improvised spear into the creature's shoulder with surgical precision. The simulated bear roared in programmed pain and swung again, but Alex was already moving, using the bear's own momentum against it. Rip watched in stunned silence as Alex systematically dismantled the bear's attack patterns. Every movement was calculated, efficient, and brutal. Alex did not fight like someone defending themselves desperately. He fought like someone who had been doing it his entire life, someone for whom violence was as natural as breathing. The bear simulation finally collapsed, its programming recognizing enough damage to trigger shutdown protocols. But before Alex's classmates could process what they had witnessed, new sounds emerged from the habitat's malfunctioning systems. The mechanical roars of additional emergency scenarios activating echoed from multiple directions. "More are coming," Alex said calmly, pulling his spear free from the deactivated bear. "The habitat's safety protocols have failed. We need to reach the emergency shelter." "How do you know where the emergency shelter is?" Nala asked, her bioluminescent patterns cycling rapidly through fear responses. "Standard habitat design places emergency facilities at the geometric center of the environment," Alex replied. "But we will have to get past whatever else the system releases." As if summoned by his words, a pack of Wolf-like creatures emerged from the forest around them. These were not the cautious simulations from the previous night, but perfect recreations of Earth's most successful pack hunters. They moved with coordinated precision, spreading out to surround the group of students. Alex's classmates huddled together as the wolves closed their circle, but Alex stepped away from the group. His movement drew the pack's attention, and suddenly all their predatory focus shifted to him. What the wolves saw was not prey, but something that set off every territorial warning there. Programming possessed, Alex made a sound that his classmates had never heard before, a low growl that seemed to emerge from somewhere deeper than his throat. It was the sound of something that refused to be prey, something that had climbed to the top of its own food chain through sheer determination and refusal to surrender. The wolves hesitated, their programming confused by prey that acted like a predator. Alex used their moment of uncertainty to attack, moving through the pack with speed and precision that seemed impossible for any being from a peaceful world. He used everything available as a weapon. Rocks became projectiles that struck with lethal accuracy. Branches became clubs and spears. Even the uneven terrain became an advantage as he used elevation changes and obstacles to divide the pack and prevent them from using their numerical advantage. Tor watched in amazement as Alex picked up a rock the size of a human head and hurled it with enough force to deactivate one of the Volf simulations completely. "That should be impossible," the granite rumbled. "The gravitational stress alone should prevent such accuracy and power." But Alex was not finished. A massive simulation of a mountain lion had emerged from the rocks above their position, leaping down toward where Nala stood frozen with terror. Alex intercepted the creature. In midair, his timing perfect as he redirected its momentum into the ground with a move that looked almost like a dance. "How are you doing this?" Rip clicked frantically, his damaged exoskeleton forcing him to remain stationary while chaos erupted around them. "No peaceful species possesses such combat capabilities." Alex paused in his systematic destruction of the habitat's predator simulations, a Volf creature hanging limply from his hands. For the first time since the emergency began, he looked directly at his classmates, and they saw something in his eyes that explained everything they had witnessed. His eyes held the calm confidence of something that had never been prey, something that had spent millions of years evolving specifically to survive in environments where everything else was trying to kill it. They were the eyes of a persistence. Hunter, a creature that won not through superior strength or speed, but through absolute refusal to give up. "Because," Alex said calmly, dropping the deactivated Volf simulation, "I am not from a peaceful world." Before his classmates could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered as something massive approached through the forest. The habitat's final emergency scenario was activating, something designed to test the absolute limits of survival capability. Alex turned toward the sound, his posture shifting into ready alertness. "What is that?" Nala whispered, her bioluminescent patches now cycling through patterns that indicated complete terror. Alex listened to the approaching sounds with the practiced ear of someone who had grown up learning to identify threats by their movement patterns. "Something big," he said simply. "Everyone stay behind me and be ready to move when I give the signal." Tor's rocky form trembled despite his species' legendary durability. "Alex, what are you? Where are you really from?" Alex smiled, and for the first time his classmates saw the expression of something that had evolved to find joy in the challenge of survival itself. "I am from Earth," he said. "Terra, the Deathworld you studied in the museum. And right now, that is exactly what you need me to be." The massive creature crashed through the tree line, and Alex moved to meet it with the fluid grace of something that had been shaped by evolution specifically for moments like this. His classmates watched in stunned silence as their quiet friend revealed himself to be exactly the kind of Deathworld monster they had been studying, the kind the galaxy feared would someday escape their quarantine and change everything, the extraction. Team Shuttle arrived to find Habitat 7 in complete chaos. Emergency lights flashed red across the landscape, and smoke rose from several damaged environmental control systems. The rescue team's leader, Commander Vex, stared at the scanner readings in disbelief as they approached the landing zone. "Impossible," Vex muttered, his scaled face showing confusion. "The readings indicate that all emergency scenarios were activated simultaneously. No student group should have survived that level of system failure." Through the shuttle's viewports, they could see Alex standing in the center of what looked like a battlefield. Around him lay the deactivated forms of dozens of predator simulations, scattered like broken toys across the artificial landscape. His three alien classmates huddled together near a makeshift shelter, their eyes wide with shock and something that might have been terror. Alex himself appeared completely calm, though. His clothes were torn and dirty from combat. He stood with the relaxed alertness of someone who had just finished a challenging but manageable workout rather than someone who had survived what should have been certain death. Professor Thymel was among the first to exit the rescue shuttle, his four eyes taking in the devastation with growing amazement. "What happened here?" he demanded. "The safety protocols should have prevented this level of scenario activation." "System malfunction," Alex replied simply. The emergency scenarios activated without proper restraint programming. We survived? Survived? Thamol's voice rose to a pitch that indicated extreme stress. These scenarios were designed to test the absolute limits of Deathworld survival capability. They should have been lethal to any standard galactic species. Rip struggled to his feet, his exoskeleton now held together by emergency repair webbing from their survival kits. Professor, he clicked weakly, Alex is not what we thought he was. He is not from a peaceful world. Nala's bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns that cycled through the entire spectrum of her species' emotional responses. He fought them, Professor, all of them. He fought predator simulations that should have killed us all, and he won. Tor's massive rocky form trembled as he spoke. I have never seen anything like it. He moved like the creatures themselves, but with intelligence and purpose that exceeded anything in our studies. Professor Thimmel's crystalline skin began to reflect light in sharp, agitated patterns as the implications of what he was hearing began to sink in. That is impossible. All exchange students undergo thorough background verification. If Alex were from a death world, especially a quarantined one, it would have been detected. Alex stepped forward and several members of the rescue team instinctively moved back. There was something different about him now, something that had been hidden before, but was no longer concealed. His movements held a fluid precision that spoke of capabilities far beyond those of any peaceful species. My name is Alex, he said calmly. I am a human from Earth, which you call Terra. My people have been making quiet contact with galactic civilization for several decades through carefully managed cultural exchange programs. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Commander Vex's scaled hands moved toward his sidearm before stopping as he realized the futility of such an action. Professor Thimmel's 4 eyes focused on Alex with an intensity that suggested he was completely reevaluating everything he thought he knew about Deathworld species. That is impossible, Thimmel repeated, but his voice now carried uncertainty rather than conviction. Terra is quarantined. The Galactic Council classified it as too dangerous for contact. The Council classified it as dangerous because they were afraid, Alex replied. They looked at our world and saw only the predators and the hostile environment. They never bothered to understand that we are not monsters. We are simply adapted to survive in conditions that you consider impossible. Rip's mandibles clicked nervously as he processed this information. But the way you fought those creatures, the capabilities you displayed, they were beyond anything we have studied. How do you explain such abilities? Alex smiled, the same quiet expression his classmates had seen in the classroom for months. But now they understood what lay behind it. Every human child learns to throw objects accurately because we evolved to hunt with projectile weapons. We climb trees for recreation because our ancestors lived in them. We run long distances to stay healthy because we are persistence hunters, who evolved to outlast our prey over days or weeks. He gestured toward the scattered simulation creatures. What you call supernatural survival abilities, we call basic life skills. What you consider impossible endurance and pain tolerance, we consider normal human baseline. We camp in wilderness environments for fun because that is where we feel most comfortable. Nala's bioluminescent patterns stabilized into something approaching wonder. You mean everything you did, all those impossible things, that is normal for your species? Every human can do what I did, Alex confirmed. Some are better at it than others, just like any skill, but the basic capabilities are universal among my people. We are all persistence hunters. We are all adapted to survive in environments that would kill most galactic species within hours. Professor. Thamel moved closer, his scientific curiosity beginning to overcome his initial shock. But how did you maintain the deception for so long? Surely your capabilities would have been noticed during normal activities. It was not a deception, Alex replied. It was simply restraint. Humans are very good at adapting our behavior to match social expectations. We learned early in our contact with galactic civilization that our natural abilities frightened other species, so our exchange students are trained to operate well below their actual capabilities. Commander Vex finally found his voice. What you are describing suggests that humans are essentially living weapons? How can the Council allow such beings to interact with peaceful galactic civilization? Alex's expression grew serious. Because we are not weapons, Commander, we are people. Yes, we are adapted to survive in hostile environments. Yes, we have capabilities that seem impossible to species from peaceful worlds. But we are also capable of art, literature, philosophy, and love. We build societies based on cooperation and mutual support. We value life and work to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He gestured toward his alien classmates. I spent months learning alongside these beings, sharing meals with them, helping them with their studies, and genuinely caring about their welfare. When they were threatened, I protected them not because I am a weapon, but because they are my friends. Tor rumbled thoughtfully. You concealed your true nature to avoid frightening us, but when we needed protection, you revealed yourself completely. To save us, that is what humans do, Alex said simply. We adapt to the social environment we find ourselves in, but we never abandon those who need our help. Professor Thymel was quiet for several minutes, his four eyes moving between Alex and the devastation around them. Finally, he spoke. I will need to file a complete report on this incident. The implications for our understanding of Deathworld species and galactic contact protocols are enormous. I understand, Alex replied. My people knew this day would come eventually. We have been preparing for formal contact with the Galactic Council for years. Perhaps it is time to move beyond secret exchange programs and establish honest diplomatic relations. Rip's exoskeleton made soft clicking sounds as he considered everything he had learned. Alex, will you still be able to attend classes with us, now that we know what you are? Alex looked at his three classmates, searching their faces for signs of fear or rejection. Instead, he found curiosity, respect, and what might have been friendship. Would you want me to? I understand if my true nature makes you uncomfortable. Nala's bioluminescent patches shifted to patterns that indicated warm affection mixed with amazement. You saved our lives. You protected us when we were helpless. The fact that you are capable of such things while choosing to be gentle and kind makes you remarkable, not frightening. Besides, Tor added with what might have been humor, having a Deathworld monster as a study partner will certainly make our xenobiology examinations much more interesting. As the rescue shuttle prepared for departure, Professor Thymel pulled Alex aside. You realize this changes everything, the Kethrin said quietly. Once the Council learns that humans have been successfully integrating into galactic society, they will have to reconsider their entire approach to Deathworld species. Alex nodded. My people are ready for that conversation, Professor. We have always believed that the galaxy is big enough for all kinds of life, even life that evolved under extreme conditions. What will you do now? Thymel asked. Alex looked out over the damaged habitat where he had finally revealed his true nature to save his friends. I will continue my studies. I will continue learning about the galaxy and its many species. And I will help my people and yours understand that being adapted for survival does not make someone a monster. He paused, then added with a slight smile, though I suppose I will need to be more careful about hiding my abilities during future practical examinations. As the shuttle lifted off from Habitat 7, Alex sat with his three alien classmates, finally able to be himself completely. For the first time since arriving at the Institute, Rip asked detailed questions about human anatomy and evolutionary adaptations. Nala wanted to know about Earth's ecosystems and environmental conditions. Tor was fascinated by human social structures and how a species of persistence hunters had developed cooperative civilization. For the first time in months, Alex did not have to carefully monitor his strength, moderate his reflexes, or pretend that normal galactic gravity felt heavy to him. His friends now understood what he was, and rather than being frightened, they were amazed and grateful. So? Nala asked as Kepler Station grew larger in the shuttle's viewport. What other impossible things can humans do that we have not seen yet? Alex laughed, a sound that no longer needed to be carefully modulated to avoid displaying too much confidence or joy in challenges. Well, he said, wait until you see what we can do when we are not trying to hide our capabilities. The galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place. Behind them, the damaged habitat served as evidence that sometimes the most remarkable survival trait is not the ability to endure impossible conditions, but the wisdom to use that ability in service of protecting others rather than dominating them. The quiet exchange student had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a Deathworld monster, who chose to be a guardian rather than a predator.